Hello everyone. Welcome to the Wacko Prophet podcast. My name is Imran. The Wacko Prophet podcast was started by me in early September 2020 with the intention of geeking out with a potential audience about movies, TV series, books and games. All things fiction. We are now in the 5th episode of my podcast, and as of this episode, we are halfway through reviewing and discussing about season 1 of the YouTube Red and Netflix series Cobra Kai. Okay, let's get right into it. Episode 5, as I said, marks the halfway point of season 1, and in terms of payback and payoff of personal investment, it is probably my favorite episode. If you're a returning listener, then you know the drill. If you're new, welcome. And please make sure that you watch the episode in question before you listen to my amateur yet over-enthusiastic opinion of it. It's alright. I can wait. So this episode is called Counterbalance. I don't go over the story from beginning to end, but I will be talking about the good, the bad, and also highlighting some important parts of the episode and making some predictions. Also, remember, these are entirely my opinions. So if you feel like I missed something or that I was incorrect about something, please feel free to drop me a message or give me a shout out in any of my social media. You can find the links to my social media on the description of this podcast and we can hash it out. But ultimately, I may just have a different opinion than yours. Okay, to start off with, first and foremost, the good. Okay, so before I get into it, if you have watched this episode, then you know most likely what I think the best part of it is. But I'll talk about some other stuff first. Number 1, Aisha's story trajectory. This episode did something unexpected, but in hindsight makes sense and is a very pleasant surprise, at least for me. They set up Aisha's story to cross with Cobra Kai. If you do remember, Aisha is Samantha's nerdy friend who is bullied by the mean girls. So it does make a lot of sense to cross Aisha's story with Cobra Kai's and with Johnny's. And I appreciate that the story is going that way. So the story is being expanded, but in a very normal, very organic way. She becomes the second student of the new Cobra Kai dojo. Johnny's own man-child boneheadedness almost gets in the way of that happening, but I'm happy to see that Miguel continues being a positive influence in Johnny's decision-making, which makes me love their whole dynamic even more. I cannot say that I dislike Johnny's admittedly kiddish, take-no-shit attitude, especially in that scene when he hears about how Aisha is being bullied online by anonymous people. If you remember, and again, I'm assuming that you watched the episode, his main concern there was not the fact that she was being bullied, but more that the pussies who were doing it don't have the guts to do it face-to-face, which is just so wrong in so many levels, but it is pretty on brand for who we know Johnny to be. And it seems to work on Aisha. His attitude and his anger towards it seems to work on Aisha. I'm reminded about the second confrontation that Johnny had with Daniel in number 3 in the sudden Halloween dance episode. If you remember, he said to Daniel that the lessons worked. This is what he seems to be channeling now. While Miyagi-Do, back in the day, was about karate through peace and balance, Cobra Kai was and is about channeling your anger and spite. And the show is showing that this can, up to an extent, work. The only reason that Cobra Kai was a bad guy in the movies, other than it being an 80s movie, is because the one doing the aiming, the sensei, was a shithead. Johnny is, as of now, less of a shithead. Maybe because he knows what Kreese was, Kreese being his former sensei, if you remember. Maybe because Johnny's older, or maybe because they aren't just one-dimensional characters anymore. Whatever the reason is, I like it. Johnny is helping Miguel and Aisha channel their focus through their anger and frustration, which is maybe what they need. Aisha also proves herself to be a badass on the mat and holds nothing back. Unnatural, according to Johnny. There are several places where this may go wrong, but we'll see how it goes. Naturally, we may see Aisha turning into a bit of a bully herself, where Miguel seems to be quite balanced and focuses his anger on people who seem to deserve it. Okay, The second good thing, Johnny's family. As I guessed last time, we see a bit more into Johnny's sons and wife's lives, or former wife, I suppose. We do get some insight into how Robbie is feeling. Remember, Robert Keane is Johnny's son, and from the few scenes that we see of them, it's clear that Robbie wants to connect with his mum, who, as of now, is more interested in going out and partying and finding a man, permanent or temporary, than she is about spending time with her son. I don't want to exactly judge Shan's character here because of what she implied in number 4, because it seems that Johnny was an absentee father for most of Robbie's life. But the show does portray her as being somewhat negligent and more interested in partying and meeting guys. As of now, they seem to be showing her as another somewhat one-dimensional character akin to the Mean Girls. I don't know how I feel about that, but it does seem to be just an instrument to push Robbie into Johnny's path, which I suppose is an efficient way to move the story along. I do want to see how the whole family dynamic plays out, and I don't know whether Shan and Johnny will reconnect in any way, at least for the sake of their son. But right now, I appreciate them keeping focus on the main story, although it can be seen as lazy writing to show Shan as in such a bad light. But right now, it seems that they're setting up something for something very interesting to happen, at least within the season. I do have a complaint about how this particular thread moves forward, but I'll address it more in the bad portion of the podcast. Okay, moving on. Number 3, and the final best thing, or the final good thing about the episode. Miguel's triumph. Man, oh man, what can I say about this? I'll try. This is, in my opinion, the highlight of the series so far. They timed it perfectly, where it didn't come too early into the season, where we would have felt that it was unearned, and it did not come so late that we had lost interest. It came at the exact midpoint of the season, and it was perfect. The setup to this scene seems kind of contrived, but it does jive with Miguel's character. I'm talking, of course, about the absolute beatdown that Miguel gives to Kyler the douche and his gang in the school cafeteria. That was amazingly fun to watch. You feel so rewarded because the show spent just enough time for us to sympathize with Miguel. He's a nice kid, he's from a nice family, and seems to have a good head on his shoulders. He has been bullied constantly by Kyler and was beaten up in number 3 when he tried to stand up for himself just after joining Cobra Kai. And now we see him being an absolute natural badass at defending himself. Always being on the move, improvising and defeating 4 older and larger, in most cases, bullies. I was actually reminded of an episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender. If you've not watched that particular cartoon series, it's amazing. It aired initially on Nickelodeon, but now I believe you can watch all 3 seasons, all 3 books on Netflix. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. It's amazing and it's very easy to get into. So anyway, like I said, I was reminded of a specific episode from book 3 of The Last Airbender called Sakaz Master. If you have watched it, and if you do remember it, this is the episode where Sokka learns how to be a badass sword fighter within the confines of about a 20-minute episode. The energy of that episode and this is exactly the same. When we're watching the scenes of Sokka being a badass and Miguel being a badass, we know in the back of our mind that it all happened a bit fast, but it didn't feel too wrong because it seemed to match with each show's pace and with their respective characters. Miguel exhibits similar traits to Sokka. They're both clever, funny, and resourceful, and I can stretch my imagination just enough to believe that they can pick up a martial art relatively fast. As I said before, the cafeteria scene does seem a wee bit contrived because it all starts with Samantha, who is, as you know, Daniel's daughter, confronting Kyler about some nasty rumors that he has been spreading about what happened, what took place during the movie that we saw, I believe, in the previous episode. But I'll give it a pass because it is in Miguel's nature to stand up for someone else. Because what happens is while Samantha confronts Kyler, Miguel essentially tries to come to Samantha's rescue. And it was established earlier that Miguel likes Samantha. Not to say that Samantha can't stand up for herself. In fact, before Miguel stepped in, it did look like Samantha was getting ready to do some ass-handing herself. she was getting ready to go all Karate Kid herself. But I'm glad Miguel got his moment because he deserved it, as you know, if you've been following the series from the first episode. I do sincerely hope that Samantha gets her own moment quite soon because she does seem to be a badass herself, as I said in the previous episode. It is also very poetic that Miguel's efforts in this scene is what leads to Johnny getting more students for his dojo by the end of the episode. Because this being 2020, or I suppose 2018, where the episode is set, a bunch of people get out their phones and record Miguel's badassery. And it spreads like wildfire. And by the end of the episode, we have a bunch of people there and ready to enroll in Cobra Kai. And to Johnny's credit, he seems incredibly proud of Miguel as well, which is, in a twisted, not very politically correct kind of way, pretty sweet. It's about time Johnny got some wins, because this is definitely a win for Johnny, because it's proof for Johnny really that he is worth something, that he's worth something to someone, that Miguel actually did what he did. He was able to do what he did because of Johnny's teaching. So it really rubbed Johnny the right way. Samantha seems pretty impressed as well. Okay, that was number 5 at its absolute best. So those are the 3 things that I thought were pretty good in number 5. Those are by no means the only good things. There were some pretty interesting scenes with Daniel as well, but those are the scenes that I really enjoyed, and I want to keep it to 3 unless there's something that completely blows me away. Okay, let's move on to the bad. There was only one big bad thing for me in this episode. This is a bit of nitpicking, but I did notice it, and it does seem a little lazy, so I'm going to talk about it. I mentioned previously that the showrunners were pushing Robbie towards his father because of Shan, his mother's general behavior and disregard towards him. I also mentioned that Johnny was incredibly proud of Miguel for beating the snot out of the 4 bullies. I liked both of those scenes. What I didn't particularly like is how the show put the result of those scenes together. Case in point, Robbie walking into the frame and noticing Johnny exactly when Johnny and Miguel are having a moment and are hugging it out in the parking lot in front of the Cobra Kai dojo. And Robbie sees it, he huffs a bit because he sees that Johnny has found someone akin to a son and it's not him, and immediately leaves. And by the end of the episode, he joins the LaRusso dealership with, it seems to be, some fabricated documents. So what he sees at the Cobra Kai parking lot directly affects his decision to join the LaRusso dealership for whatever reason that he might have. I understand what they're trying to set up. This tangent may result in Robbie somehow getting involved in Miyagi-Do, again out of spite. I like that part. I like the result. What I didn't appreciate is how ham-fisted and melodramatic the scene was to get there. That Robbie coming in just in time to see that hug is some soap opera, or to my fellow Sri Lankans, some mega teledrama level bullshit. You know how in those mega teledramas, for example, I'm going to go off on a tangent here, the beloved wife of the protagonist's husband walks into the office just when the secretary of that protagonist's husband is emerging from under the desk where she has just picked up a pen that she just dropped. But it looks to the wife like her husband is getting busy with the secretary on office time. And she huffs and walks away. And while walking away, before he could chase her down and apologize, she gets hit by a car and dies, very conveniently for him. No kidding, that's something that I actually saw completely by accident on an episode of one of those mega teledramas. And what happened in this episode in Cobra Kai is not far removed from that particular fantastic chef's kiss, so bad it's good scene. Now, I do understand Cobra Kai seems to want to move along and get to the good story bits, but this scene in particular looks lazy and badly thought out. Just another reason for needless, unnecessary conflict, which, as I've explored in previous episodes, is something that I don't particularly like. Why not do something better? Why not a verbal showdown between Johnny and Robbie, where Johnny puts his foot in his mouth again? That's extremely believable given what we know about Johnny and how he talks, and given what we know about the rocky relationship between Johnny and his son. I don't know, I'm just an observer. I'm by no means a professional writer here. But as an observer, what happened just seems a little too quick and a little too hard to believe. The good news is that is all that is, in my opinion, bad about the episode. Everything else is as much as a cheesy 80s throwback show can be on point. Okay, so those are the good and the bad of the episode. I'll highlight some important things that I noticed as well that I didn't really talk about before. First, Daniel is a bit of a dick in this episode. I enjoyed it, don't get me wrong, I didn't dislike it, but he is a bit of a dick, and he does some pretty douchey things and gloats in front of Johnny at the expense of pretty much other people, other innocent bystanders. If you have watched the episode again, you know what I'm talking about, but I am glad that his wife put him in his place and reminded him of who he was. That was pretty fun to watch. Second, and related to the first one, Daniel getting back into karate. And it looks like he'll be restarting Miyagi-Do, and his motivations, contrary to what I predicted in the last episode, seems to be coming from wanting to honor his mentor, Mr. Miyagi, which seems more appropriate for his character. Third, Daniel's visit to Miyagi's grave. And that's little, very well done, cheesy, but very well done flashback. Loved it. Such a good way for Ralph Macchio, the actor, to honor his former senior actor Pat Morita, the late and great Pat Morita, and also a very good way for Daniel to honor Mr. Miyagi. The show is clearly paying respects. I love it. Okay, predictions. It's all telegraphed pretty blatantly, but Robbie is, I'm gonna guess, on the path to becoming one of, if not the protege of Daniel LaRusso when he does eventually start Miyagi-Do. We'll see what happens. What I also hope happens is, now Samantha has no reason for doing this because it is a pretty clearly telegraphed that she is competent at karate, but I hope that she gets involved in the Cobra Kai side of things as well. That would be very interesting to watch because that would bring natural, organic conflict as opposed to unnecessary ones between Daniel and Johnny. And I'm all about good conflict. Okay, that's all we have for this particular episode of The Wacko Prophet. I'm really enjoying this series and I'm very glad that I chose it as my first venture into podcasting because it's very easy to get into. It's half an hour each episode, and if you have not watched it and you're listening to 5 episodes, first of all, what are you doing here? I can wait. Please go and watch Cobra Kai, and then if you feel like it, come back and talk to me about it or listen to me talk about it, in fact. As far as how everything has been going, I do have decent numbers in terms of who is listening. I will be uploading this podcast on a weekly basis on Sunday morning, 7 a.m. Sri Lankan time. And if you're listening from the West, from the UK or the US or anywhere there, that'll probably be Saturday night for you. And it's a weekly thing that I'm doing. I'm doing the entire season of Cobra Kai, season 1, and then we'll see how it goes. I'll most likely be covering old movies that I like. When I say old, I'm talking about from the 90s to the 2010. So not that old, but old nonetheless. I'm also uploading the podcast on YouTube as well. There is no video for it yet because I don't think I'll be able to show my pretty ugly face on YouTube without the proper equipment, but I'll be uploading a YouTube version nonetheless, which you can find on my channel, The Wacko Prophet. Again, all the links for these social media and this YouTube channel is given on the description of this podcast. And that's all I have. I am recording this episode, in fact, one day before it's supposed to go up, which is a little late for me. The reason I'm so late is because I have been very, very busy and preoccupied with my day job. And I've been sick as well for the last week or so. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, but I am still sick. I'm actually recording this in between a bunch of consecutive sneezes, which I'm editing out. Yeah, that's about it. Again, thank you very much. I hope you're having a lovely day. I understand that the world is kind of on fire right now and 2020 has not been the best year. But hey, if this is rock bottom, we can only go up, baby. Oh, and before I go, a little shout out to the guest appearance of the fat guy from Borat, who had that very disturbing to watch naked fight with Borat in the first Borat movie. So shout out to him as a landlord of Johnny's lot. So I hope I see him again fully clothed, but it was really fun to see him pop up in this unexpected place. Okay, thank you very much for your time again. My name is Imran and this has been the Wacko Prophet podcast. Please subscribe and leave a review if you think that there's something that I should fix or if there's any feedback that you want to give me. I hope you have a great